Hi creators, welcome or welcome back to Academic Phoenix Plus. My name is Monica and I'm here to inspire, teach, and create. In this video tutorial, we're going to be covering how to rig Caitlyn's rifle from the show Arcane. In previous tutorials, we modeled it, UV mapped it, textured it, and now I think it'll be really cool to go ahead and rig it so that we can do some cool animations with it. If you're new to this channel, I post tutorials on a weekly basis. Software includes Maya, ZBrush, Substance Painter, and so much more. So if that is your sort of thing, please consider subscribing. So bring out that creativity, open up that software, and let's go ahead and get started in rigging Caitlyn's rifle. By the way, if you guys want to follow along, you're more than welcome to. Take a look at academicphoenixplus.com. There you will find Caitlyn's weapon and follow along. I would love it. All right, so here we are. We have our rifle. And I'm actually going to turn this little button on so it's easier to see in this mode versus in texture mode because it's a little dark. If you guys want to render it, you can also hit this little render button and you're going to notice that it's nice and dark because it has no lights. So Arno lights, physical sky, and then you can actually see the render. I personally like to select all of this and press the number 3, which means that it is now smooth preview, and then you get those nice clean edges. Over here to the left, you can see that the outliner is nice and clean. You've got a Caitlyn rifle group, and then inside that, everything has been labeled. Is it labeled appropriately? Give or take, but I'm really not a rifle person, so I kind of guessed on a lot of these knickknacks and details. So the first thing I want to do is basically figure out how I'm going to be grouping everything. The reason why we're going to be grouping is because I rather constrain groups versus constraint geometry. And if you've never actually know what constraining is, this is a great tutorial for you because this is a hard surface object. I am going to be constraining it versus using joints. Now, the idea is that this is not going to go in game. This is actually going to be done in animation, so I don't have to worry about joints. It's just going to be hard surface constraints. All right, first we have to look at reference. According to the video, the rifle does a couple of things. The first thing is that she pops it open. I don't have those details, but she pops it open and we can see her loading the gun. And of course, there's going to be a trigger and there's also going to be like a trigger guard. In this particular shot, you can see that she reloads using the trigger guard. There she goes. In this particular scene, she actually folds the weapon and then puts it in, which is why I wanted to rig it because I just thought that was such a cool technique that she folds the rifle in half and then she pulls in the barrel and then she just scoots it inside her backpack, and she does that twice. Here is a version of her pulling out the weapon really fast and boom, so you can see that little pop there. And over here, she actually gives away her rifle. First of all, she walks around in heels and you can see that she puts it in there, and there you go. So it's a very cool looking rifle, and I just thought it'd be really cool. By the way, check out her shoes. I mean, those look painful. So good job running around in that. But let's take a look at the animation again. So it's really fast. She does it really quick, but you can see that she folds it in half like that, and then she pulls the barrel in, and then you have kind of like a smaller version of the rifle. So that's kind of like the idea. All right, let's go ahead and start thinking about how to break it down. The first one's going to be this section here, which is going to be folded. So I'm going to go ahead and make a selection. I'm going to grab this one too and do a Control G, which is group. And then I'm going to double click and call this the front rifle. And I like to call it GRP for group. Now this one also gets a group as well, so that it's going to be moving like this. So I'm going to select that one, group it, Control G. And you can see it's right here. So this is going to be the muzzle group. All right. And I'm going to center the pivot for this one. So under poly modeling, there's a center pivot. And then for this one though, I'm going to center the pivot. But if I try to, rotate it or anything, the rotation actually comes from this pin. So I'm going to go ahead and press the letter D on my keyboard. And this is going to move the pivot point to here. Click D again. And then you can see that I can actually fold it. For the reload, it includes this piece as well. So I'm going to select what I called it a divider, then holding down Control, select the front of the rifle and group that as well, Control G. Again, I'm going to center that pivot, and this is going to be my reload group. I'm going to click on the letter D again to move that pivot point because, again, I need to figure out where it's going to go. And actually right here looks pretty good. I didn't model this part here. I wasn't really thinking about it. Oh, you can see that I accidentally set some sort of keyframe by hitting S. So if that happens, which happens a lot, you can just right click and break the connection because I don't need a keyframe at this time. So let me go to break connection, and hopefully nothing else has a keyframe. Okay. Finally, we have the trigger itself. So I'm going to group that one and call it the trigger group. Again, I'm going to center that pivot and try to figure out where that's best. Is that the best place? Probably not. So let me hit the letter D on my keyboard and just kind of move this around until I find the best place for a trigger. So maybe around there. Let me go a little higher. Something like that. That looks good. This is the trigger guard, Control G. Call it trigger guard group, GRP for group. Center that pivot. Again, I'm going to move the pivot point to where I feel it needs to be, right around there, and you can see that I can do the trigger guard. The rest are these guys. In case I can't really do the reload, like so, maybe I actually want to move this piece. So give the animators flexibility. So I'm going to select all of those extra pieces and also the other groups, which is the trigger guard and the trigger group. Control G those two together, and now we have the back of the rifle. Or I can call it the stock. I don't know. Stock group. Center that pivot. Again, click on the letter D and move that pivot so that we kind of know where it's going to go. So that's not a good place for it. Maybe a little bit higher. No, let's go a little lower. And maybe a little bit more in. There we go. That's a better action. Cool. Now that we have kind of like the basis, let's go ahead and create our controllers. Now I do want to do a square because I want to wrap around it and I don't want to confuse any animators with my simple controller. So I'm going to create a square that embodies the whole rifle. So to do that, I'm going to create a cube. I'm going to press F to focus, and then I'm going to go to create curve tool, EP curve tools, and let's go to the options. I'm going to reset my tool, and the default is 3 cubic, but what I want is linear. So select that, holding down the letter V, which stands for vertex. I'm going to outline this cube. So I'm going to click once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, and just kind of go around creating a curve. So again, I'm holding down V, which stands for vertex. So it's going to snap to the vertices. So I'm going to click through here. And yes, I am going to be outlining it maybe a couple of times. So it's going to have overlapping curves because at the end, it's going to look like a cube. And I think I did it. Yes. All right, there it is. Delete that cube. And now we have a curve outline. Cool. So far, so good. Moving it up. Make it a little bigger. And I'm going to take a look at, I'm going to go to show viewport lights. And then I'm going to go into wireframe to make sure this is actually in the center, which it is. Great. And the first one I want to create is going to be this one first, which is the biggest piece here. Then I'm going to duplicate it, Control D, move this one, and this one's going to be smaller, right? So I'm going to lift it up a little bit, and I'm going to make it a little smaller. So the whole goal is for an animator, or really anybody, but mostly animators, is to make sure that if they see this, they're going to be like, oh, I know what that is. That is for the muzzle. Oh, okay, that is for another piece. So I'm going to make it a little bit smaller from the above, so everything looks good. And then I'm going to select these two and center the pivot, delete the history, freeze the transformation. And of course, we need to label it. And I like to label things according to what I built. So for example, this is going to control the muzzle group. So this is going to be my muzzle controller. Muzzle CTRL for controller. The other one, the front of the rifle. So I'm going to call this front rifle controller. Now this one doesn't really matter where the pivot point is, but it's going to matter for here. So I'm going to click on the letter D. And again, this is going to control the one that actually twists. So I'm going to make sure that that's here, or when it folds. And I'm going to show you now like the theory behind it, and then I'm going to do the rest. So the idea is that I'm going to grab the front rifle, the controller, then I'm going to grab the group. So this is the nice thing about labeling everything the same so that it's easy. Grab the front rifle, select the front rifle group, and then go to, this is under rigging. We're going to go to constraint, parent, options. And we want to make sure maintain offset is on and then add. So what happens is that I'm going to select my controller, and then it's going to rotate, and you can see that it took everything with it, which is in the group. So we're going to do the same thing for the muzzle. I'm going to open up the front rifle. I'm going to see there's a group right here. So I'm going to select my controller, control click, select the muzzle group, and then go to constraint parent. And this one will also be able to move around. Now it does rotate, so I'm going to lock and hide some of the controls. I'll do that at the very end. So right now I'm just going to create the controllers, make sure you freeze the transformations, move the pivot, constraint, and then afterwards we'll actually change the color, we'll lock and hide attributes, and a bunch of other stuff. All right, next is the reload. So I'm going to select my muzzle, I'm going to control D, I'm going to move it, and this one I'm going to make a little smaller and a little bigger here because I want to make sure that it follows this. And this is where I think some people may get a little bit confused. So I'm going to shape it a little bit so that it looks more like the piece. So I'm going to grab the controller, right click, control vertex, make a selection. I'm going to shape this a little bit. So I'm hoping that this will make sense to the animator that, hey, this controls this portion of the weapon. So something like that, maybe a little bit like that. So there's a little overlap. So hopefully this makes sense. I don't like the angle that I did. I want to match it a little bit more. So again, I'm going to go to this side, push this here, push this over here, and maybe select these and just kind of nudge it over. All right, so I'm going to forget to hit those two buttons, delete the history, freeze the transformations, and now we have the reload one. So I'm going to make this into the reload. Double click, reload, control. Again, select it, select reload group, constraint parent. So you're noticing the outliner, you are going to get this little chain. So those chains are in fact constraints. So don't delete them. That they're actually there to let you know visually that there is a constraint. So let's take a look at what I just did. I'm going to select this, and I forgot to move the pivot point first of all. So that was my mistake. And you'll notice that it's only moving this one versus the whole group. And if I grab this one, you'll notice that it doesn't move the whole thing, right? So I still need to do a little bit of parenting, but let me undo my constraint here. So you'll notice that it's still acting like it's got a constraint. So I'm going to delete it. You can just select that little chain and delete it. And I'm going to hit D and just kind of move this over again and select it, constraint parent. All right, now we need to do a little bit of parenting for the controller. So to do that, I'm going to grab the front of the rifle, middle mouse and drag to the reload, and then open this up. And then the muzzle is going to be into the front. So that means that if I select a reload and I go like this, all the controllers go with it. If I grab the front of the rifle and I go like this, then it goes with it as well. And then if I grab this one, and that's exactly what I want. Yay. All right, let's go ahead and select the muzzle again, Control D, unparent, Shift P, move it to the side, and I'm going to go ahead and create the trigger guard. So this will be easier if I maybe go to the side view or the front view in this case and just kind of make it smaller. I'm going to rotate it and maybe grab some control points and make sure that it fits. Over here. Maybe make it a little skinnier. Rotate it slightly. And again, make sure you freeze the transformations. Now the pivot point should be up here. So I click on the letter D and moved it up. And now that I think about it, this is kind of wrapped up. Let me just move this here because it should be, the trigger guard's actually this model. All right, let's go ahead and go back to here. Let's go to object mode. And for this one, I'm going to make it extra skinny. So let's go ahead and make it nice and thin. That looks good. And I'm going to open a stock. So I've got my trigger guard here, which I'm going to relabel trigger guard control. I'm going to duplicate it, and this one's going to be my trigger, so I'm going to make it nice and thin, rotate it, and shoop. Let's see, let's take this here, maybe make it look like this. So again, it's looking really nice. Object mode. I probably will make it a little skinnier. Now, somewhere along the way, things got moved. So now I want to make sure everything is in the center. So I'm going to grab this. I am going to center the pivot, and then I'm going to move this to the grid, which is basically the center of the object. And then I can just kind of fix it by selecting those and then flattening them out using scale. Let me grab the trigger guard to make sure that's nice and straight. So that was just something I did. That's okay. It's fixed now. Cool. So double check to make sure you freeze the transformations. You don't need to center the pivot, but I am going to move my pivot point here. And this one already has been moved. So now I can go ahead and constrain. Select the trigger guard, select a trigger guard group, constrain parent. This is actually the trigger, so I'm going to delete the number and also the guard. And select it, select a group, constraint parent. Okay, so now it goes boom, boom, and then choo-choo. Cool beans. All right, it's looking good. Next, let's go ahead and do another one. Let's grab the muzzle, Control D. Again, Shift P to unparent. This is going to be the stock, so let's go ahead and label it now before we get confused. Stock controller. Gonna make it nice and big and wrap it around my object. So again, I'm gonna move this down, make it bigger. And again, I like to shape it a little bit so that it looks, so if somebody sees it, they see that the controller kind of matches the shape of the object. So I'm going to make these here and maybe get these a little higher. Maybe a little more dramatic like this. Object mode. Cool. Now I want to make sure it's bigger so it's noticeable. Make him a little wider, and there we go. I'm a little worried about this part here, so let me select this and bring this down. And this looks like a tangent, so I'm gonna just move this down a little more. All right, cool. Grab the stock group, constraint parent, and now we have everything but the parenting. So let's select these two. Middle mouse and drag it to the stock, and now we have this one. So, whoop, I forgot to move the pivot point, because if you try to move the pivot point, it takes the gun with it, right? So we need to make sure that's undone first. So let me go ahead and undo all of this. There it is. All right, let's move that pivot point. The stock is a little bit more down, so let me grab the stock and just kind of move this down around here. Again, don't forget to freeze those transformations. Constrain parent. And that looks good. All right. And these guys are good. Yep. And the trigger guard is good. The trigger is good. Yes. Okay, great. So now I'm going to select these two, middle mouse. And now basically everything's going to be working together. Whee! Awesome. All right, so now we need one more, which is basically going to be the world space. So the world space means that it's the one that everyone's going to be able to select, and you place it and then you can animate it. Now, we probably want to use it as a square, but if I try to grab a square like this one here under curves, you're going to see that it's actually a bunch of lines, and that's not really going to work. So I have to make my own. I can actually do this in the top view, like so. And then I'm going to create curves, EP curve tool. This time hold down X, which is going to snap it to the grid. And I'm going to go here. I'm going to go across here. Get a skip 2, go all the way over here. And now I have is a rectangle. And that's going to be the world one. So this is going to be Caitlyn's rifle control. And the only thing we need to do is actually grab these controllers, these two controllers, middle mouse and drag it, and then we have a controller. So that means that I can move it around. You can see that all the pieces go with it. But when I try to scale, it doesn't look very good. I can rotate it, but if I try to scale, I have this issue. To fix that, we just have to use another constraint, which is going to be scale. So I'm going to select my Caitlyn control. I'm going to select a group, and then I'm going to go to constraint, scale options, make sure maintain offset is on, and then add. So now when I scale, the rifle scales as well. So that means that no matter how large or small your character is, you can just put this in there and fit it. And it works everywhere. Whee. And that's awesome. All right, so that's basically the rig. Let's go ahead and start cleaning up our outliner so that this isn't going to cause any issues to the animator. We're trying to make it as simple as possible to the animators. So what that means is that I'm going to select my geometry here. And I'm going to create a group, Control G. And this is going to be called Do Not Touch. So hopefully that tells the animators, please don't touch this. And I also don't want anybody to accidentally select this and move it around. So I'm going to select these, right click, and we're going to go to lock and hide selected. Now I do have all of these controllers. I'm going to do a Control G, and this is going to be called controllers group. And same story for this one. I'm going to select them all and then lock and hide selected. Now I can grab all of these two and do a Control G, and this is going to be Caitlyn Rifle All. And again, select all of this, right click, and then do lock and hide selected. Now I do have a reference layer that I'm going to delete. I'm going to open this up. I'm going to grab the controls group, create a layer, and then call this the control layer. And then I'm going to grab the do not touch, and this is going to be my geometry layer. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I want to go to my geo layer and change this into reference so you can't accidentally select the geometry. We always want to animate as the controllers. We never want to actually animate the geometry. We can just select a controller. And then for the controllers layer, I can always hide the controllers here, which is very fancy. Cool. Let's color the controllers. To color the controllers, we're going to select a controller, do a Control A, which opens up the attributes, and we want to go to the actual stock controller. And you can see that we have the display. I'm going to scroll down, and we have a drawing override, and we can enable a overdrive, and we can choose a color. This is an index color, so that means that I can choose a color from the index. So let's say I want a yellow to be at the front, which is right here, and then you'll notice that my controller turns yellow. If I want these to be a different color though, I can select this one to enable override, and again I can change it to a different color. Now there is an RGB option, so for example if I want this to be more like a regular blue, I can just go ahead and select these, enable override, change this to RGB, and then select the blue. In some cases, maybe I want something else. Maybe I want it to be more like this should be blue, and this can be more like a teal, which I kind of like, and then this one can be, you know, a different, even lighter color. Totally up to you how you want to do the colors of your model. I'm not sure. I'm not convinced with this one. Let me choose a different color. I like to use orange for this one because I want to make it still feel like it's part of the yellows. So I'm going to choose kind of like a more orange color. Let me go lighter. There we go. And then still be part of like the yellow family, if that makes any sense. Grab that one, enable override, choose RGB, and I might choose that same orange for that one. And for this one, I don't know. She's kind of blue. She's kind of like a deep blue, isn't she? So I can choose that type of blue. You don't want to choose green or white because those look like selection, that things have been selected. So maybe a teal just for a little change. And there we go. That's how you can color your objects. The last thing we're going to do is lock and hide selected. So what does that mean? I'm going to select this one. I'm going to grab visibility and lock and hide so I don't accidentally, you know, change the visibility. Can select this one, and for this one the only thing I really wanted to do is to rotate, and you can see that I only rotated in the Z, right? So that means that I'm going to select everything but the Z, and then I can lock and hide selected. So same thing for this one. I only wanted to go so far. Select this one, deselect and rotate Z, lock and hide selected. And same for this one. Grab this one, deselect Z, and then lock and hide selected. This is Z as well. I think all of them are Z, so I'm going to see if I can do both. Let's see, select these two, select this, get rid of the Z, lock and hide selected. Select this one, same story, lock and hide selected. Again, I just want them to only be able to rotate. I don't want them to be able to translate or anything else. For this one, I only want it to go to translate X, so I'm going to select all these and then lock and hide selected. And finally, the last thing I'd like to do is basically limit the motion. So that means that I don't want them to go wee. I want them to actually limit the movement. So I'm going to go in here to the controller and there's limit information. This one is going to be rotation, and I only want it to go about this far. So that's about a -45. So I can turn this one on. And then for this one, I'm basically going to say maybe a 5 degrees of change. So that means that when an animator selects this, they can't go any further than this, which is going to help not break things, which is important. Same thing for this one. It all depends how far you want to go. So maybe -30 is the way to go. So you can click on this one, change it to -30. Then for this one, we can say maybe 3. So that means you can go a little bit further for the sake of animation, but not much further than that. So then I'm going to do that for the rest of them. I'm going to grab this one. I'm going to make sure that it goes this direction, which is 21. Turn that on. For this one, I'm going to say -5. And the default should be a 0. For this one, I'm going to select it. I'm going to go like this. I think this is a good enough number, so 50, turn that on. And then for this one, same story, maybe a -5, so that if they need to do a little quick animation, they can, but not to break it. All right, let's keep going for this one. Same story. I don't want it really to go this direction, which is about a +3, so I'm going to change this one to maybe a 4. And then for this one, I don't want it to go any further than probably this because it's intersecting. So around -185. And of course, the default's going to be 0. Finally, this one, we don't want it to go any further than maybe this because then the geometry breaks. This is under Translate. So open up Translate and it's about a -10. So scoot it over here and then it's going to get pushed in pretty far. So I'd say at least a 6. This looks good. So that means that I can do that. Cool. And basically that's how we can limit the animation. So now we can zero everything out. We can grab this and fold it. Whee. Then she can go ahead and bring this in and it's ready for animation. All right. Hopefully you guys learned a thing or two. If you did, please like and subscribe. That is your message to me, letting me know that you like this content and that you want to see more. Don't forget to share my videos. If you know somebody that has a weapon that they want to rig, give them my videos. Hopefully they will be able to rig any weapon that they have. Also take a look at academicphoenixplus.com. There you will find free ebooks, resources, and 3D models and so much more. So take a look at academicphoenixplus.com. Again, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Keep creating, and I will see you next time in another video tutorial.